Hello everyone and welcome back to Nothing But Professional. Before we jump into the video, I wanted to remind you all to subscribe to the channel and make sure to hit that notification button. With the world going crazy lately due to COVID-19, I have had a lot of time on my hands. I have been able to rewatch some older shows that I fell in love with when I was a kid, and I'm sure many of you have gone into the black hole of YouTube like I have. With sports no longer going on at the current moment and nothing else for me to really watch, I've been scrolling through Twitter a lot. ESPN put out a picture of a 5-on-5 matchup with some all-stars from different generations and asked the crowd who would win. The matchup consisted of some of the best NBA players to ever play the game. On one side you had Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Hakeem Olajuwon, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. On the other side you had Dwayne Wade, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Tim Duncan, and Shaquille O'Neal. Now personally, with this generation of players, as much as I do love Dwayne Wade, I already have a shooting guard and I don't really want to put LeBron at the point guard spot and move Dwayne Wade to the 3. So with no disrespect, I'm going to switch out Wade for another superstar who I loved watching as a kid and I believe does not get talked about enough in the greatness conversations. The White Mamba himself, Brian Scalabrine. Just kidding, I am talking about Steve Nash. Someone who I believe can help facilitate to the other players around him and is one of the more true point guards of his time. He was also an incredible three-point shooter and could be inducted into the Hall of Fame based solely on his ability to pass the ball. Before we jump into who I think will win, the one thing I want to make sure everyone knows is that I'm going to break down each player's strengths and weaknesses on offense and defense with the matchup they will be going against. I will also be going into depth on how the teams would work together in order to win. So with all that being said, let's jump right into the video. The first matchup we are going to look at is between Magic Johnson and Steve Nash. Both point guards who are very well known for their passing ability, and although when you look at the initial matchup, I think it's very obvious who has the automatic advantage when it comes to height. Magic Johnson stands at a large 6 feet 9 inches tall, while Nash only stands at 6 feet 3 inches tall. With Magic's overwhelming size against Nash, he will be able to easily look over him and make the passes he will need to. Although Nash could still play off a little bit, because Magic Johnson only shot 30% from behind the arc, so he won't be much of a threat back there. But then again, the three-point shot was not all used back then, and Magic only averaged 1 3-point attempt per game. With a team of a bunch of pure scorers, Magic Johnson will be the distributor. Someone who sets the offense and makes sure that everyone of the all-star scorers will get theirs. He is arguably one of the best distributors the game has ever seen and is known as the greatest point guard of all time. On the other hand, height advantage was never a problem for Nash on the offensive side of the ball. He was always the smallest guy on the court. He was used to making adjustments and knowing how to play around the rim. His ability to shoot the 3 ball off the dribble was also one of his best attributes, and his overall shooting is not discussed amongst the greats either. For a career, he averaged 42.8% from behind the arc. This is 11th amongst NBA players in history, and like Magic Johnson, Nash was one of the best players to ever play the point guard position. He was also the leader of the Mike D'Antoni 7-second offense, which took the NBA by storm. But when it comes down to the end of it, I'm going to have to give this matchup to Magic Johnson, a type of player whose skill set did not match up to his size back in the time, and a player like no one has ever seen before. I think his size over Nash to facilitate this offense will give him the overall advantage in a 7-game series. Now let's jump over to which I think is the most even matchup in this entire list, Michael Jordan versus Kobe Bryant. When you purely look at the size of both these players, they both stand at 6'6". Jordan weighed in at 216 pounds, and Kobe was 212 pounds. When it also came to the skill level, both were the same. Their ability to drive, their ability to shoot the 3-point shot, and their mid-range jumper and fadeaway were almost identical. When it came down to their mentality as well, I'm going to have to say they were the same. Both were freaks of nature. Kobe's mentality to never wanting to lose anything. Rumor has it back in high school, Kobe would compete against some of the players on his team to 100. Constantly. And to talk about his greatness, one of his worst games he ever played, he won 100-12. Jumping over to Michael Jordan, he was so competitive that Will Smith, a longtime friend, claimed he used to hang out with him and it was always just a competition. He claimed he is the most competitive person he has ever met on this earth in an interview with Jimmy Kimmel. He said that Jordan would compete against anyone, anytime. One time he even challenged Will Smith to see who could drink their water faster. When it comes to the drive of both these players, it's hard to honestly tell who was more competitive. So when it comes to them matching up against each other in a 7-game series, both in their prime, it's impossible for me to really decide who would top each other. So I'm going to call this one a tie. Heading over to an interesting matchup that includes two different types of players, LeBron James and Larry Bird. On one side, you have one of the most physically dominant players to ever dribble a basketball, while on the other hand, you have one of the most dominant shooters to ever play in the NBA. When we look at LeBron James, we see someone who has mastered the art of the fadeaway and the ability to drive to the hole at will. He also comes with a great three-point shot, but to me, the most inconsistent parts of his game are clutch moments and his struggles from the free throw line. He is still known as one of the greatest players to ever play the game. He can play all 5 positions on the court, and he can guard anyone in any position and play against anyone on the offensive side of the ball. Let's also not forget he has one of the greatest games in NBA history. I'm taking you back to a moment when LeBron showed this face and people knew that they were going to see something special. Back in the 2012 Eastern Conference Finals, in Game 6 against the Boston Celtics, he scored 45 points, grabbed 15 rebounds, passed along 5 assists, all this on shooting 73% from the field. To this day, I think it's one of the best performances in a game that truly defined who LeBron James was. When we jump over to Larry Bird, one of the greatest shooters and one of the most confident players to ever play. Back in 1988, Larry Bird won his 3rd three-point shooting contest in his warm-up. Before the contest even started, Larry Bird walked into the locker room, looked around and asked the other players, "So who's coming in second?" The man was never really phased. For a career, he ended with 24 points per game and shot 50% from the field. So basically, when he put up a shot, you almost had to pray it wouldn't go in. When looking at these matchups, I'm going to give the edge a little to LeBron James. With his size and strength and his overall ability to beat Bird on offense is what is going to ultimately make my decision on this one. I also think the fact that LeBron can play more with the ball in his hands from the very beginning will give Bird more struggle than I think vice versa. Jumping over to a matchup that I do believe is more one-sided based on one's ability to play around the rim. The matchup between Hakeem Olajuwon and Tim Duncan is definitely more advantage to Olajuwon. A player who made an MVP David Robinson look like an average player. He scored a total of 39 points, pulled down 17 rebounds, and had 5 blocks against him. His overall ability to score and pull down rebounds was not what he was known for. The best attribute he ever had was his footwork. The moves he was able to do around the rim made other centers feel like they couldn't guard him and put players like Shaq in awe of his abilities. There's even a video where Shaq admits Olajuwon was better than Jordan. As much as Tim Duncan is great and also has the name Mr. Fundamental for being, well, it's pretty self-explanatory, he also learned from one of the greatest coaches ever in Greg Popovich, but I just don't think he would be able to outwit or guard one of the greatest post players to ever play the game. Jumping over to our final matchup, we have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar versus Shaquille O'Neal. Remember, we are talking about both players in their absolute primes, for which to me I think is for Jabbar, his 3rd year in the league in 1971 to 1972, where he averaged 35 points and 17 rebounds. For Shaq, I'm going to take a look back at his 1999-2000 NBA season, where he averaged 29 points and pulled down 13 rebounds. Well, you might look at the numbers and believe, isn't the choice obvious? Well, to me, it's not that simple. Jabbar played in a time where the average center was only 6'10", and he stood at a whopping 7'2". He rarely ever played someone who could match up with him. Although putting him against a full 7'1", 300-pound Shaq is hard to dispute that the strength of Shaq could overpower him, push him off his mark, and not give him the opportunity as much to play close to the rim. I know he wouldn't be able to out-rebound him, so I believe his 2.5 career average for offensive rebounds would not be as prominent against Shaq in a 7-game series. So with that being said, I'm going to have to give this one to Shaq. So now that we have looked at all the matchups, what do my decisions come to? We have 2 wins on both sides and 1 tie. But the deciding factor is going to be who created a better team, because in the end, it's going to be the deciding factor. I'm going to have to give this win to Team 1. I believe the 3 players from the greatest team ever assembled, the 1992 Dream Team, amongst 2 of the greatest scorers of all time, will be able to take down Team number 2. This is also because of the mentality that Team 1 has over Team number 2. Their drive and execution over Team number 2 and their pure willingness not to lose will ultimately give them the victory. Do you guys agree with me? Do you not? Let me know in the comments below. Also, thank you all for watching, and once again, make sure to hit that subscribe button and also hit that notification button to catch all my latest videos. If you are interested in talk shows, I host a weekly live stream twice a week, Wednesday and Friday at 12:30 Mountain Standard Time, so make sure to check it out. Link is in the description below. I hope you are all staying safe and staying at home. We can all get through this together. I know it. Thank you again, and I'll catch you next time on Nothing But Professional.